our last topic for the second quarter, which is all about Earth and space. So during elementary, the focus of the science topics for Earth and space is all about the sun and the different planets in our solar system. And for grade 8, our focus is about the other members of the solar system. Yung mga hindi masyadong major parts of the solar system, but they are still a part of our solar system. Hindi sila masyadong nabibigyan ng pansin kasi most of us, we focus on the sun and most of us focus on the different planets. So for this last topic, our discussion will be all about comets. What is a comet? What is an asteroid? And what is a meteor? Basically, meteor will be further divided into meteoroids and meteorites and meteors. So they are different depending on where they are. So yung location niya. And we will learn all about that today in our discussion. Okay, so of course, let's start with a comet. So a comet is a small body of ice, rock, and cosmic dust that is loosely packed together. So as you can see here on a picture, this is actually a comet. The distinguishing characteristic of a comet is that it has a tail. And later on, we will know bakit nga ba merong tail ang isang comet. And one of the reason is because of the material na bumubuo sa kanya. So according to this definition, the materials that compose a comet is ice, rock, and dust. So para siyang pinagsama-sama, in the center, there is a rock and then nabalutan siya ng ice at saka ng dust. So as you can imagine, when the comet travels near the sun, the ice component starts to melt. And that is the reason why if you see a comet far from a sun, it is basically spherical in shape. But once it gets nearer the sun, that's when it starts to develop the tail. Because the tail is the comet's ice slowly melting as it gets nearer and nearer the sun. So yung tail kasi na to, ito yung distinguishing characteristic niya. We know that we are seeing a comet kasi meron siya laging tail. And the tail is not always present. It is only present when the comet is near the sun and its ice is melting. So because of its different materials that it is composed of, which is dust and rocks and ice, scientists basically call comets as dirty snowballs. So para lang talaga siyang I don't know, in other countries, one of their activities kapag ka nagkaroon ng pag nag-snowfall is usually they create snowballs. So parang ganun lang talaga yung comets. It's like a snowball with rocks and dust on it na kumakapit sa kanya as it travels not just around the solar system but in other solar systems as well. So habang natutunaw yung ice, the bigger yung kanyang nagiging tail. Okay, so these are some of the pictures taken from the Hubble telescope or from other equipment used by scientists to observe the skies. So ayan nga, talagang it's like a blinding light pero meron siyang tail. Okay? And the tail gets bigger and bigger as it gets nearer and nearer our sun. Okay? And the comet's orbit, nabanggit ko na kanina, is that these comets, they don't just stay in our solar system. Masyado silang magala. They actually reach other solar systems in our galaxy. Ganun kalayo yung tinatravel nila. Why? Because these comets, they don't necessarily follow the same orbit as our planets. Our planets kasi in the solar system, they orbit around our sun. So basically, ang kanilang orbit is more of spherical. It goes around and around the sun. But when it comes to your comets, ang kanilang orbit is very elliptical in shape. So ito yung word niya, elliptical siya. So when we say elliptical, parang oblong, more of mahaba siya. And that's the reason why some comets, they can really go out of our solar system and visit other solar systems because of their very wide reach elliptical orbits. Okay? And their velocity increases greatly when they are near the sun. And the reason for that is because as they get near the sun, their mass gets smaller and smaller because the ice is melting. So habang mas lumiliit siya, mas bumibilis ang kanyang velocity. And then when it reaches the outskirts of the sun, yung hindi na siya naiinitan, then it will start accumulating ice again. It will get bigger again. So that's when the velocity eventually slows down. Okay, so it slows down when it reaches the far reaches of the orbit. Okay, um, the comet, when you see it, when you see it, it looks like a comet has its own source of light, but actually no. Based on its component, a comet is only snow, ice, and dust. So there's really no source of light inside the comet. The reason why it looks like it is bright and shiny is because of the melting ice. So nagre-reflect yung light coming from the sun doon sa natutunaw na yellow. That's the reason why it looks like it is shining or it has its own source of light. Pero when it is far from the sun and the ice is not melting or there is no light that is reflected on the ice, a comet is virtually invisible. It's very difficult to see them. And that is one of the dangers of a comet. Hindi mo siya nakikita at makikita mo lang siya kapag malapit na siya sa'yo. So, in case na magko-collide ang isang planet at ang isang orbit, kapag ka hindi mo siya nakita, so very catastrophic siya kasi wala ka nang magagawa, malapit na siya sa'yo. So, you just have to brace for the impact. Okay? And you have to remember, no matter how small, we are talking about rocks that are traveling at very high speed. So because of the velocity or because of its speed, yung kanyang magiging effect, level of destruction will still be catastrophic. So yan yung isa sa danger ng comets. They're virtually invisible if they are far from the sun. Lucky for us, being the third planet from the sun, makikita natin ng isang comet kapag malapit na siya sa atin. Pero ang disadvantage pa rin nun is, yes, we can see it, pero hindi naman natin pwedeng alisin sa orbit yung comet. Hindi rin naman natin pwedeng alisin sa orbit yung ating planet. So siguro evacuation lang on their calculation kung saan siya mag-hit para ma-lower down yung kanyang casualty. Okay? And the solar wind pushes the tail away from the sun. So these are actually your comets. And you have to remember that a comet's tail is always facing away from the sun. Kasi nandito yung heat, the source of heat. So yung melting is always on the other side. And on top of that, there is a solar wind that pushes the melting ice on the opposite direction. So as you can see here, this is a comet that is traveling elliptically around the sun, and all of its tail, yung blue and yellow light on this part, is always facing away from the sun. Okay? And kapag malapit na ang isang comet sa sun, sabi natin nakikita yung tail ng isang comet. And there are actually several parts of a comet. Of course, the first one is the nucleus. The nucleus is the one, yung pinaka-packed na rock and ice in the middle. And then yung medyo loosely packed surrounding the nucleus is what we call as the coma. And then yung nagme-melt na ice at nakikita natin as tail is what we call as a dust tail. So mukha lang siyang maliit, but actually a comet's tail can reach up to 10 million kilometers long. Ganon kahaba yung kanyang nakikreate na tail. Pero syempre, when we see it with our naked eye, hindi siya ganon kahaba or hindi siya ganon kapansin. Okay? And ayan, sabi niya dito, the tail always points away from the sun. And scientists have two theories on the origin of comets. So saan daw ba nanggaling ang comets? So scientists, they only have two areas or two regions in our solar system and in the galaxy where they think comets were actually created or where they come from. So the first one is the Oort cloud. The Oort cloud is far, wait lang. The Oort cloud is a region that surrounds our solar system. So siya yung medyo mas malayo. Oh my God. Sorry, wait lang. So yung medyo mas malayo, is near Neptune. Ito yung mga comets that regularly visit our solar system. Mas maliliit yung kanilang elliptical orbit or mas maliliit yung distance that they travel. So usually, we see comets coming from the Kuiper Belt regularly. So ito yung mga comets na nakikita natin after every 5 years or every 6 years or every 10 years. Regularly visit our planet because their orbit is nearby. Laging nadadaanan yung ating planet. Compared to the comets that originated from the Oort cloud. Since this is outside of our solar system, scientists say that comets coming from the Oort cloud, they travel longer distances. Ito yung mga comets that are able to visit other solar systems within the Milky Way galaxy. Mas malayo yung nararating nilang mga lugar. And because mas malayo yung kanilang orbit, it means that it takes a long time for them to really travel back. So hindi natin sila madalas nakikita. Ito yung mga comets that we see every 20 years or every 30 years, or kung makita mo man sila, sila yung mga once in a lifetime comets kasi ganun katagal yung kanilang time to really travel or to take the distance na tinatravel nila. So yung iba, every 60 years, every 80 years. So kung makita mo man siya ngayon, for example, ngayon you are how old? 15, 14, kasi hintayin mo pa 80 years before it will come back na makikita ulit dito sa atin. So usually yung iba, hindi na, once in a lifetime experience na lang sila. So yun yung difference ng Oort cloud and Kuiper Belt. Yung Kuiper Belt, these are the comets that we regularly see because their orbit is shorter, whereas the Oort cloud, these are the comets that we do not usually see because they have longer orbits, therefore mas matagal yung time before they can come back at nakikita dito sa Earth. Okay? Do we have questions about Oort cloud and Kuiper Belt? If it's clear, parisa ka ng thumbs up sign, please. Ayan, thank you very much. So if it's clear, let's continue. So Halley's Comet, this is one of the most common comet that we have sa ating Earth. Medyo mahaba-haba na yung history niya. So very common na visitor siya, itong Halley's Comet. And because of that, they think that Halley's Comet comes from or originated from the Kuiper Belt. So the first record of this comet is as early as 240 before Christ. So during the time na nagsisimula pa lang ang civilization in Egypt, they already have astronomers who have observed Halley's Comet or Halley's Comet visiting our planet. So meron na silang observation from comets as early as 240 BC. Okay? So ayan, they have records showing the comet's appearances in Chinese, in Babylonia, and even in medieval European chroniclers. But it was named after Edmund Halley. In 1705, siya na yung talagang nakapag-observe how long yung orbit nitong comet na to, when can we expect it to appear. So, oh my God, ayan. So, it last appeared in 1986 and it will next appear sometime in 2061. Buhay pa ba tayo nun? Kaya buhay pa nun. So, in 40 years, we can experience another visit from this comet. Ganon katagal, di ba? Kasi nga, malalayo yung distances that they are traveling. Okay? So basically, this is what a comet looks like. So the middle is the nucleus. Surrounding it is the loosely packed ice, dust, and rocks, which is what we call as the coma. And then the melting part that is always pointing away from the sun is what we call as the comet's tail. Okay? So ito ang kanilang observation in 1910 with Halley's Comet. As it gets closer to the sun, scientists observe that the tail gets bigger and bigger as it gets nearer the sun. And then as it gets farther and farther away from the sun, the tail gets smaller until it becomes almost invisible. So the reason why it gets bigger is because when it gets nearer the sun, it means that the comet is experiencing more heat coming from the sun. And because there is more heat, it means that there is more and more ice and dust that is melting. That's the reason why the tail is growing longer and bigger. Pero when it moves away from the sun, it is not absorbing as much heat as before. So the ice will stop melting. So the tail gets smaller and smaller. Okay, so these are pictures of comets. So probably nandito yung kanyang nucleus, and then this one, itong mahabang ito is the tail. Another picture. So this one is the tail of a comet. Ayan. Okay, so are we clear about comets? Wala namang questions. So one of the benefits, let's talk about the negative side first. The negative side of comets is that there's always a possibility of collision with a comet, especially for planets that are very far from the sun. Diba we mentioned earlier that when a comet is far from the sun, it's almost invisible. So it's like you are colliding with something that you cannot see. So that is always a possibility. So that is one of the dangers of a comet. But what are the benefits of comets? A lot of scientists use comets to study the different solar systems in our galaxy, especially yung mga comets that can travel really far distances. Scientists gets more idea about these different solar systems or about these different planets based on the dust that they collect during their travel. So there was one expedition where they sent a spaceship to follow a comet. And then parang meron siyang malaking plate, and then it just absorbs or it collects kung ano yung mga natatanggal doon sa comet na yon. So some of them, they were able to gather evidences of other solar systems existing in our galaxy, and they were able to get information what kind of solar system are these. Are these solar system na may sun din? Are these solar system na may planets din that is similar to Earth? So they can get an idea about these things using the dust collected from a comet. So yun yung isa sa mga benefits niya. Okay, so now let's move forward to the other member of the solar system, which is an asteroid. I'm sure much familiar kayo sa asteroid because basically asteroids are space rocks. They are rocks that is found on space. The only difference is that yung rocks natin here on Earth is basically made up of compact na soil, diba? Pero on space, your asteroids, not all of them are actually made up of compact soil or more of earthy ang kanyang component. Some asteroids contain metals. So may mga metallic asteroids that is floating on space. And because of that, they are more dangerous kasi syempre mas malaki yung magiging destruction niya in the event that it collides or it hits our planet, which is a big possibility because based on the history of our planet, there are really asteroids that have collided with Earth. So some of them includes yung theory of how dinosaurs became extinct. Some scientists believe that the extinction of dinosaurs were actually caused by asteroids. And there is another theory that our moon is actually an asteroid that collided with our planet. And then, nung nag-collide siya with our planet, originally it was big. When it collided with our planet, it became smaller kasi kumbaga nahati siya into smaller pieces. And one of those smaller pieces eventually became our moon. Okay? So asteroids are commonly found in the asteroid belt. And in our solar system, the asteroid belt is found in between Mars and Jupiter. Wait lang po. Humes siya. Bigyan mo na lang na kahit ano. Kahit ano from Humes. Yung mga ano, sino pa ba yung mga nandun? O yung kay Shama, sige. Okay. Ayun. So, the asteroid belt is found in between Mars and Jupiter. So, the reason why it's very difficult to travel in space is because we cannot go far or hindi natin kayang lampasan yung tinatawag nilang asteroid belt. Pag dumaan ka talaga dun sa asteroid belt, the possibility of you na makalampas sa asteroid belt without injury or without casualty doon sa spaceship is very, very low. Because basically, it's a long stretch of orbit that is where you have a lot of asteroids na pwedeng mag-hit doon sa spaceship ninyo. To be honest, the farthest, pinakamalayo that our scientist was able to travel is actually the moon. But after from the moon, hindi pa natin natatravel. Even yung Mars, sa Mars, we have, meron na silang napadalang mga spaceship, but it's always without scientists. Always yung robots lang or always yung spaceships lang. Okay? And one of the reasons why they said Jupiter has a lot of moons, di ba? If you remember from the upper elementary, how many moons does Jupiter have? Who can answer? Mavin, Eliza, Kyla.
Jupiter, sir.
Yes.
Nasa 50 ata.
Nasa 50. Final answer, Benjamin. Upper LM.
Sir, somewhere between 60 and 80. I don't remember.
Okay, sabi ni Kyla 64. So maraming moons ang Jupiter. And the reason why it has a lot of moons is because it is located near the asteroid belt. And you have to remember that Jupiter is a very big planet. Ibig sabihin, malaki yung kanyang gravitational pull. So maraming asteroids siyang nahahatak papalapit sa kanya. And these asteroids starts orbiting Jupiter. And that's the reason why Jupiter has a lot of moons. Whereas in our planet, Earth, we are very small. So ibig sabihin, our gravitational pull is also very small. At the same time, malayo tayo from the asteroid belt. So the only reason why we have a moon is because may asteroid na nag-hit sa Earth, and then yung natira doon, yung smaller fragment ng asteroid na yon, eventually orbited or revolved around our planet. Kaya tayo nagkaroon ng moon. So not all planets have moons, and not all planets have equal number of moons. It depends on their gravitational pull at saka syempre yung kanilang location. Okay? So asteroids are believed to be leftovers from the formation of the solar system. A lot of scientists believe that during the Big Bang, there's a lot of asteroids in our solar system, and they eventually formed our planets. The reason why they believe this is because pareho yung mga materials that is found in asteroids and pareho yung mga materials that is found on our planet. So for example, some asteroids, they contain iron. We also have iron in our planet. So they believe na yung mga asteroids na yon, nagdikit-dikit lang sila, and then they form these planets that starts orbiting the sun. Tapos yung mga natirang hindi na na-form into planets, yun na yung mga naiwang asteroids that is floating between Mars and Jupiter, or just floating around in space. Okay? So these are some of the anong tawag dito, asteroids. So if you can see here in this picture, there is a huge anong tawag dito, accumulation of asteroids in between the planets Jupiter and Mars. So yung inner circles and the outer circles of our solar system is actually divided, or anong tawag dito, hinahati siya ng napakaraming asteroids here. And can you imagine how dangerous it is for a spaceship to be traveling in this area? So wala pang nakakalampas. In the movie, ano tawag dito, Interstellar, ang ginawa, muntik na silang masira during dito sa sa asteroid belt na to. Luckily, they were able to survive. And then when they reached Jupiter, yun na yung nagkaroon na sila ng, anong tawag dito, worm, ano yun? Space worm, hindi, black worm, whatever. Parang shortcut papunta dun sa other solar system. Okay? Unfortunately, I will be ending the meeting room in less than 1 minute. So, paki-rejoin na lang po ulit doon sa same meeting room so we can continue with our discussion.